Hello, students. Welcome back for another topic. And this week we are going to be discussing cells again. We've been talking about cells previously, and we'll be talking about cells again this week and the next week too. And every week we are unpacking new information about cells. So today we are going to begin this week's topic, which is all about cell processes. Last week we discussed the various structures of cells, and so this week we're going to talk about what those structures are doing. How do they function? What are the processes that they are involved in every moment of every day of our lives and the lives of any living thing that is made up of cells? So let's get right into it with our first item of information here regarding cell processes, which has to do with energy. Because when we discuss cell processes, it requires energy. In fact, it is the ways in which cells obtain and use energy. Now, how many of you have something like this at home or in school, maybe in your pocket right now? Hopefully not. Hopefully it's packed away where it should be. But many of you have cell phones. And if you don't have a cell phone, you are using Google Chromebooks, you are using computers, you use technology all the time. But what do you have to do to one of these cell phones every night, probably, if it's not to run out of energy? What do you have to do to these cell phones all the time? Yeah, you got to plug it in, plug it in. You probably have a charger like this somewhere laying around, and you've got to plug in the power. Plug in the power. I got the power. You got to plug in the power cord into an outlet, and that sends energy in the form of electricity through the wire, out the other end of the wire, that then gets plugged into your cell phone. You've got to power up your cell phone. You got to charge your cell phone every so often, or it's going to die. The cell phone will die if it doesn't obtain and use energy in an efficient manner. And guess what? It is the same exact deal with the cells of living things. Every cell that is alive has to obtain and use energy. And that is what this week's topic is really all about. How that energy is taken in, how it's used or manipulated, and how it's released from all living cells. So we are going to continue here by discussing 5 processes of cells, 5 cell processes. And so let's begin with number 1. Number 1 cell process for today is metabolism. Metabolism is a word that should sound somewhat familiar to you. It's a previous vocabulary word, and it is a general term. Metabolism includes all of the chemical activities that occur in cells. So it's a broad term because, as we're going to discover, there are a number of chemical activities that occur in cells, but the general catchphrase, if you will, the general term, the big word for the day is metabolism. And you may remember what some of those more specific terms are. In fact, let's see if you remember any of those things that are included in metabolism. Let's pause for a moment. All right. Maybe you also added to that list ingestion, digestion, respiration, excretion. All of those shuns are the specific forms of metabolism, which include all the chemical activities that occur in cells. Now, in a broad sense, metabolism involves the ability to change energy from one form to another. Now, next year in eighth grade, you're going to explore many different forms of energy, and you're going to be doing a number of experiments with these different forms of energy and changing them from one form to another form. But we can get a little introduction to this with our life science topics this year as we discuss metabolism, the ability to change energy from one form to another. Let me give you an example. An example would be chemical energy change to motion, change to heat. All of these are examples of energy. And let me just give you a practical example. Raise your hand if you had breakfast this morning. I hope you did, because breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I know you've heard that over and over again from various people, but do you know why? Why is breakfast, why is breakfast the most important meal of the day? Pause and see if you can answer that question. Well, hopefully, some of you caught on to the word itself. You are breaking a fast. A fast is a period of time without consuming any food, which is a form of chemical energy. And if you don't break a fast, it's called starvation. You will go hungry and eventually you will die from the cellular level upward to the entire organism because your cells require energy. So, breakfast, you are breaking the fast, a period without food, because food, like my little Nature Valley trail mix fruit and nut bar that I enjoy as a little snack during the day, there's energy in here. In fact, energy in food is measured in calories. There's 150 calories. Next year in eighth grade, you'll learn exactly what a calorie is. But food is a form of chemical energy, and you need chemical energy as a living being because all of the cells of your body require chemical energy. That's like the starting point of metabolism. You got to ingest chemical energy. Now, once you've done that, your body, and starting on a cellular level, your cells, thus your entire body, start converting or changing the form of that chemical energy into energy of motion. I'm doing it right now. I'm moving around, but you don't have to be crazy like me and move around on a macro level to understand that even on a microscopic level, your body, made of trillions of cells, all of those cells are moving around as well. Not dancing around necessarily, but there's a lot of activity going on inside every cell. And we're going to talk about some of those things that are going on here today and tomorrow. And they're all called metabolism. Metabolism involves, on a cellular level, the ability of individual cells to take the chemical energy that we ingest and convert it into energy of motion. Things are moving around. Now, we can demonstrate this on a macro level right now. You have consumed something, I certainly hope, within the last 24 hours. So you've ingested the chemical energy. I'm going to ask you to take your two hands together right now. And when I count to 3, you're going to clap them as hard as you can and then rub them until I count to 10. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Take your hands now and put them up to your face. Can you feel the heat energy? Because what you've just done, believe it or not, is this whole example. You've taken the chemical energy that has been stored in your body, you've converted it or changed its form to motion, which then changed its form to heat energy. You know, these forms of energy can go from one form to another form to another form. And it's almost like a cycle that can repeat one another. Then you generate a lot of heat energy, you're burning calories, and then that will require you to fuel up with more chemical energy. It's a process that repeats itself over and over again for as long as you live and as long as cells live. So that is metabolism in a nutshell. And here is a picture of a cell. And you can see there are certain things going into the cell, including oxygen, glucose, fatty acids, other substances that go into the cell. There's a chain of chemical reactions that occur here within the cell. And then there is the release of different kinds of energy, like ATP, adenosine triphosphate energy. Woo! There's water and carbon dioxide that are released as waste products. So there's ingestion, digestion, excretion, for example, in the metabolism of every cell of our bodies. There's a lot going on, folks. There's a lot going on that the eyes can't see right away. So metabolism, very, very important with cells. Without it, well, the cells would not be alive. So let's number 2. Number two is the breaking down of food. And the basic form of food, as we know, is sugars. And in our bodies, on a cellular level, we call that sugar glucose, into energy. I want to go over to a close-up view here and give you a little demonstration of breaking down glucose. I have a couple of things here. I have a mortar and pestle. A mortar and pestle is a device used by chemists to break things down. You might notice if you've ever been to a pharmacy to get medicines of some kind, they usually have a large or small mortar and pestle somewhere in their little laboratory behind the counter as well, because you can do things with a mortar and pestle, including breaking things down. You can take solids and break them down into powders, and sometimes medication requires powders. Well, this respiration, I know many people think of the word respiration and automatically think breathing. Well, our individual cells don't have lungs or gills to actually breathe. And this passage of energy takes place differently on a cellular level. But I do want to use this as an example, this mortar and pestle, because I've got a solid cube of sugar here. Can you see that? It's a solid cube of sugar. And if I wanted to dissolve this sugar really quick in my belly, I could just swallow this sugar cube and it would eventually dissolve, but it might hurt on the way down, all right, because this sugar cube is solid. We could do something else to it to make it go down a little bit easier. we could put it in, use a mortar and pestle to grind it or break it down. Oh yeah, you can take your aggression out with a mortar and pestle. We can grind down or break down that sugar cube into, check this out, can you see that? Powder. I've just pulverized that sugar cube. And I could put it into a spoon, and I don't have one here with me. I could put it into a spoon and take it with some medicine, because just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in the most delightful way. Maybe you've heard that song before, but powdered sugar will dissolve in your belly a lot quicker than a solid cube of sugar. Now, think about this analogy, perhaps, when we think about cellular respiration as we head back to our notes. Cellular respiration, the breaking down of food, in particular glucose, into energy. The cells have to do this in order for the cells to function. And there are different ways that cells do this. In fact, there are two types of respiration, two types of cellular respiration. Remember, respiration is the breaking down of food into energy. It's not like the breathing that we do as an organism. We're talking about what happens on a cellular level. So let's talk about the two kinds of respiration. The first kind of respiration, and here's just a quick little, I forgot about this slide. Sorry about that. Respiration, let me add one more note about respiration, which is kind of cool. Respiration is essentially the opposite chemical function as photosynthesis. It does involve the breathing, as I was talking earlier, but check this out. Here we have plant cells, and in a plant cell, we have chloroplasts, and when they're exposed to sunlight energy, photosynthesis takes place, producing glucose and oxygen, which our animal cells require and in order to release chemical energy. But within our mighty mitochondria inside our cells, we take that glucose and that oxygen and convert it through cellular respiration and produce carbon dioxide and water. But we're changing light energy into chemical energy. Plants do this through photosynthesis. We do it through cellular respiration. Now back to the two types of respiration. Type number one. The first type of respiration is called aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration. As you're writing that down, aerobic. Think about that word aerobic. Now, I know it's not spelled the same, but what does the first part of that word sound like? Air. Aerobic. This is how I remember which one is which, by the way. Aerobic does, in fact, require the oxygen in the air in order for respiration to take place, the breaking down of that glucose. And there's another way I remember which one this is, and let me give you a close-up view of a demonstration of aerobic respiration. Have any of you ever heard of aerobics? Aerobic exercises? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of aerobic exercises, maybe in phys ed class. Aerobics. What are aerobics? Aerobics are exercises that you do using your body, moving around, maybe dancing, bop, 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 boop, bop, 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 boop, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, the various calisthenics or exercises that make you start breathing more deeply, getting out of breath. Those aerobics cause your body to require more oxygen. Key word here as we go back to our notes. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen. Oxygen is required with aerobic respiration. So I like to think of aerobic, air, oxygen, aerobic exercising, breathing deeply, needing more oxygen. That's what helps me remember that aerobic respiration requires oxygen. By the way, in this first diagram, no. This young lady is not sneezing out ketchup and mustard. I know it looks that way, doesn't it? But rather, these are little arrows. The little red arrows are representing oxygen going up her schnoz, and she's snoozing with her schnoz. And the yellow are arrows of carbon dioxide coming out of her nose. So we've got oxygen going in, food coming in, carbon dioxide, and water as waste materials coming out. But remember, aerobic respiration requires oxygen. That brings us to the second type of respiration, anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration. When the prefix an is put in front of a word, raise your hand if you know what that does to the meaning of the word. Okay. When you put an in front of the word, it changes the meaning of the word to indicate the opposite or not whatever the rest of the word is. So that being the case, if aerobic respiration requires oxygen, what can you tell me about anaerobic respiration? I hope you said does not require oxygen, because that is absolutely correct. Anaerobic respiration requires no oxygen. Well, let's give you a moment to write that down as we discuss it a little bit. Anaerobic, an means no. Anaerobic, no oxygen. So again, remember, aerobic requires oxygen, anaerobic, no oxygen is required. And in the background of this slide are some pictures here of common substances that are actually foods that are produced through the process of anaerobic respiration. Let me point them out to you. I know they're a little bit fuzzy here. Soy sauce. Anybody like soy sauce? Anybody like Chinese food and dribbling some soy sauce on your chicken chow mein, perhaps? Soy sauce is made through an anaerobic process. How many of you like cheese and yogurt? Cheese and yogurt are made anaerobically. How many of you like beer and wine? None of you should be putting your hands up because the legal drinking age in New Jersey is 21 years old. So neither one of you should have personal experience with beer or wine. We'll talk about those in a moment. But both of those are foods produced through cellular anaerobic respiration. The last one I'm sure you've experienced, bread. Bread is produced through anaerobic respiration. Let's pick this up a little bit more. Let's talk about it a little bit more. Anaerobic respiration has another name, AKA. Anaerobic respiration is also known as fermentation. Fermentation. When something ferments, it is undergoing fermentation. It's undergoing anaerobic respiration. Maybe you've heard of the word fermenting or ferment or fermentation before. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of those terms before and tell us what you think they mean. Okay. Fermenting is often used in the context of something rotting, like food rotting can be called fermenting. If you leave fruit out too long, apples, bananas, whatever, and they start rotting, that's called fermenting. Fermentation is when anaerobic respiration is taking place. Now, get a load of this. Yeast. We actually had yeast in last week's lab activity, or was it the week before? It was 2 weeks ago when we were discussing finding living things and testing for living things. That unicellular yeast we animated by adding the needs for living things, the sugar, the warm water, etc., to that test tube. And we detected the strong odor of the yeast. Well, yeast is a living thing. In fact, it's a unicellular organism, meaning that it is only, well, you tell me, it is unicellular. Unicellular, UNI. What do you think that prefix means? Were you thinking of a unicycle or a unibrow? What does uni mean? It means one. A unicellular organism is a one-celled organism. Yeast is a one-celled organism. And when yeast is alive and it's doing its thing and it's undergoing metabolism, it can undergo anaerobic respiration or fermentation. And the waste product, the liquid waste material, now you can think of your liquid waste material as a human being. Well, other organisms have different liquid waste materials. Yeast has a liquid waste material, and it's called alcohol. Alcohol is really nothing more than yeast pee. It is the liquid waste material from the fermentation of yeast. Different kinds of yeast and different kinds of food will produce either alcohol in the form of beer when you're using grain to feed the yeast, or if you're using fruit to feed the yeast, then the alcohol is used to make wine. But in both cases, beer, wine, they are essentially yeast pee. So when you do become of age and you are 21 years old and you're thinking about imbibing to celebrate your legal age, think about what you're about to pour into your mouth. Just think about it. Just think about it. So yeast is an example of something that undergoes anaerobic respiration or fermentation. Oops. So that is anaerobic and aerobic respiration. I thought I had another slide there, but I do not. You know what? Let me just add one more thing here regarding the bread. Here's what I wanted to mention. And some of the cheese, like Swiss cheese. Anybody like Swiss cheese? Anybody like bread? Okay. If you've ever seen Swiss cheese or if you've ever seen a slice of bread, you know they have bubbles in them, right? Well, do any of you know how those bubbles got there? Well, Both of them are formed through the use of yeast. And there's another waste product that yeast generates through anaerobic respiration, and that is carbon dioxide bubbles. Now, think about you for a moment and think about the gaseous wastes that you expel from your body, either from the top or from the bottom. Well, yeast releases its own gaseous waste materials in the form of carbon dioxide. And if it is found in the making of Swiss cheese, or if it's found in the making of bread, those bubbles are formed by the release of the waste gases from yeast. So basically, when you eat a sandwich, you're eating trapped yeast burps, or you could call them something else if you really wish, but that's what causes bread to rise. The rising of bread is a result of fermentation of yeast. It is releasing gaseous wastes, which is what causes the dough to rise. So we've talked a bit about metabolism and respiration today. I think that's enough for today. So we're going to pause our notes here and we'll pick it up again tomorrow. But for now, allow me to say bye-bye.